Hello, my name's David Cody. I am the current Eswau Huppeday Lodge 560 advisor from the Piedmont Council, North Carolina, and I have been collecting North Carolina OA and my lodge ever since 1977 when I had the opportunity to go to the 1977 National Scout Jamboree. We had scouting in our council in the early teens up until today. Our lodge didn't start till 1964, and part of the reason being is our camp director, Mr. Shield, who the camp was eventually known for, Shield Scout Reservation, did not want to have a honor society at camp. And so the very first time we ever had a honor society was the year after Mr. Shield left, which was 1964. Our first lodge meeting held that year. We had candidates and members from Skyuka Lodge to help induct our newest members. We ordered our first patch and then received that in 1965, and pictured on your screen right now are the three variants of that first design, showing the land between the rivers, which is what Eswau Huppeday in Cherokee means. The fun part about our first flap is the discourse that goes along in our own lodge of what really was our first flap. Nationally, the very first flap is the top flap you see. In our lodge, we call that the black teepee flap. It's really a dark gray thread. Below that is the flap that we call the tan teepee, and sometimes that's noted as a beige color. Structurally, on these two flaps, there's some big differences, and you can see them. The bottom flap has taller letters. It also has more rocks in the bottom fire lay. There's 7 rocks in the fire lay. So the two patches have a different punch pattern when they were made. The more common variety of all those patches, and what lots of people sometimes assume is the very first flap, is there to the right, and that's just what we call in our lodge the gray teepee flap. It was issued up until 1978 when we changed to our next design. So from 65 to 78, this particular similar design was issued. So why do we have a controversy? Well, the Blue Book writers list us as having 3 designs: S1 dark gray teepee, and S2 ABC gray teepees with different shades of yellow, and then they list S3 as the tan teepee. The Arapaho shows pictures and descriptions, and the pictures show S1 is the light gray teepee, show a patch which is S3 is not identified, and S2 is a dark gray. Their listing in Arapaho 2 lists S1 as a dark gray, the S2 is a tan with large letters, and S3 is a tan with small letters. And even in the first flap in color book shows a different light gray design. So go on looking at Arapaho, because that was really the first book, and you look. So our page in the book there, it shows S1, and it's clearly the lighter of the gray teepees of between what Arapaho shows as S1 and S2. So they designate S2 with the dark teepees. Below there, you can see what Arapaho lists as their description, and clearly they list it as dark gray as being S1, but clearly in their pictures, somebody's confused when they made it. To furthermore that, they show our second design with the Indians on it as S3-4, which clearly is not what they show in their wording. So lots of confusion with the earliest book. So in the early days of collecting and early days of bidding on a sheet of paper and hoping 2 months later you get a patch back, for our lodge, you never know what you got, S1, 2, or 3. And sometimes people in our lodge were really lucky and ended up with the darker teepee. So what really happened? We really don't know, and that's unfortunate. We don't have records from our lodge from those days. But we do know in 1965 that we did have a flap. We had members attend the Dixie Fellowship in 1965, and we had members attend NOAC in 1965. And we can speculate that either of those 2 events, we had people trading patches. The very first members actually end up getting what we call the tan teepee, the big lettered flap on their shirts. Anybody that has extras from the very first year, they all have extra tan teepee flaps. One of our lodge officers from 1965, Randy Farabee, had the opportunity to interview at a Dixie Fellowship 10 years ago. We asked him about the first design, and I quote him here as best I can. He said, we wanted the teepees the color of the ones that were in the Kistler Arena, which was our arena area there at camp. And the teepees there were of a really odd yellow tan color. And he said that's what we wanted. Well, Jimmy Arthurs and Kevin Gantt, David Cody laid out some flaps for Randy at that Dixie Fellowship with the first three designs. And Randy picks out what we would call the Tan Teepee as being the first flap. Another firsthand information from our youth lodge treasurer at the time, Steve Barlow, who we've interviewed since, remembers having a dark gray teepee flap. And his story goes is that they thought they were mistakes, and they even set them to the side of the lodge door because they looked different and they thought they were odd. And that was in 1966 when he was treasurer. A very small NOAC contingent. So the people that went to NOAC that year were not big patch traders. They would have certainly had some ability to have X flaps, but we just don't know what they would have had. So what are some other factors that go into the mystery of our true S1? The Blue Book S1 and S2 ABC are same punch pattern. They only differ in color thread. So for some people, they would call that an MVE. The Tan Teepee, which Blue Book lists as S3, has a different punch pattern. There's different numbers of rocks and there's different letter height. The S2 ABC, like I said earlier, was issued up until 79 when they pulled out the last ones in the lodge trunk. Our very first neckerchief, which was designed to match our first flap, is actually the tan. The second neckerchief has a darker color teepee on it. The bigger thing is, and you're lucky to get one of these big punch patterns from the early flap design, you know they make them on these huge pieces of hard paper so that they can lay out how the patches are designed. And it just doesn't seem smart to design a patch, change the patch, and then go back to the very first punch pattern again. It could certainly have happened, but it just seems odd. The bad thing is we don't have any financial records from that time or any other thing from, I believe it was Midwest Swiss that made them. Got some information from Kevin Gantt. Oh, I misspelled his name there. Gantt. Sorry about that, Kevin. Which showed our first unit elections being held and our first ordeal in 1964. And this is a quote out of Kevin's Facebook post. And Kevin had the opportunity to meet a member that most of us call Sash and Dashers. And he only attended one OA function in his life, and that was his ordeal. And so we actually have his membership card from his induction, and he has his only patch that he got in October 10th, 1964. And lo and behold, this is what we call the Tan Teepee, which would disprove what Blue Book says and disprove what Arapho lists as our S1. We do not and have not been able to get a picture of a scout in 1964 wearing a flap. It's actually really easy to tell the difference in the flaps, mostly because of the letter height. We really believe that really the first flap is this hand larger letter 7 rock flap. Dark teepee continues to be the most sought after, and if it was the oddity that was produced in the midst of all the S2 ABCs, somebody changed the thread roll that day and we got black teepees. That's what Steve Barlow's account would suggest in 1966. And so it's the bottom line. Several of us believe that the Blue Book S3 is the first flap, and nationally the dark gray flap is recognized as S1.